back to the Not Carrie Bradshaw YouTube channel. In this video, I'm recapping episode 8 of Lovecraft Country, Jig-A-Bobo. I'm gonna be really honest with you guys. This was my least favorite episode of the season thus far. I will get into why as this review progresses. I think the main thing for me was that this was supposed to be a de-centered episode. Diana was supposed to be the center of this episode, but her storyline felt very choppy. I think maybe that was intentional in some ways because they wanted to communicate the erasure or the silencing of young Black girls in our coming of age. It's definitely something that I can relate to, and I wanted to really be here for the way they were communicating it, but it felt like maybe there were scenes missing or something. We'll get into it. So this episode opens with everyone at Bobo's funeral, Emmett Till's funeral. I was not expecting for them to go into the historical realism of his death in such a manner. I don't think that it was a bad choice. I think that if you're going to talk about Black horror, the real life Black horror of racism it can't be overlooked. And I think it's frustrating too when people say this thing about, why does everything have to be about race? And it's like, because y'all make everything about race. Like, if we could navigate the world as, just people who happen to look different in some ways, we wouldn't have to have these conversations. But because y'all can't seem to be okay with it, we kind of have to suffer. So you can't talk about Black horror in America without talking about the realistic horror of racism and the lives taken as a result of it. So it's hot, it's crowded, it's sad, it's emotionally charged, obviously, and Emmett Till's mom made the choice to give him an open casket because she wanted people to see the horror of what happened to her son. And that being the cover of Jet magazine during that time was, I think, transformative for a lot of people, because Emmett Till's mom said herself, she knew that racism was a thing, but she was not prepared for it to come to her front door. So she really didn't think about what would happen sending her young Black son to Mississippi during this time period. Like, it didn't register to her that it was a thing that could happen to her family, and it did. And she wanted people to see, if it could happen to me, it could happen to you, it could happen to you. And Diana is distraught over this smell. I still don't know the historical context of that. I'm wondering, was he not embalmed properly? But then I'm also wondering, even if you are embalmed and you're in a hot, crowded, non-air conditioned church, would there still be a smell? I was a little bit confused about that. I don't know if they were taking artistic license there, but I think on the podcast they said it was a very accurate thing that his body smelled. I'm not sure about that, and I wanted to Google, but I'm just too emotional of a person. Emmett Till's murder, his death, everything that happened afterwards, it really hurts my heart, like in my soul. That hurts me. I remember going to the African American History and Culture Museum in DC and going through that exhibit. They make it kind of like the funeral processional, where if you've been to a funeral, you walk in this line and you walk, and his actual casket was there, and it's such, you can physically feel. For me, I physically felt sorrow in my heart, in my spirit. Like, that did something to me. I don't ever remember not being familiar with what happened to him, but something about that exhibit was just very emotional and sad. And which, yes, of course, but it was like a feeling. It was like being there almost, even though obviously you can't see his body or anything like that, but you could feel something. So I can only imagine what it was like in real life. And Diana, back to the story, Diana is here. Her best friend has been brutally murdered. Her dad is dead. Her mom is elsewhere. She doesn't know. They're telling her that she's on a trip, but she doesn't believe that. She's a smart girl. She's like, y'all are giving me bullshit. Everybody's lying to me. What's the real tea? And she gets so frustrated and overwhelmed that she runs away from this funeral, and the adults kind of don't notice because they're all discussing whether or not she should even be there. And it's really interesting. They mentioned on the Lovecraft radio podcast how that is a part of like Black girlhood, is that people discuss your upbringing more in theory than in practice. People talk a lot about raising children, or at least when I was coming up. I think things are a little bit different now, but people talk so much about Black girls and how to properly raise them, but I don't think that there was a real focus on practicing that, actually implementing those things. And like, we just weren't allowed to. For me, sometimes I felt like as a Black girl, which I don't know if I had that context at the time, but it felt sometimes like I was just wrong for existing. Like, you walk in a room and it's like, what you doing in here? But you know, grown folks talking, and it's like, well, okay, girl, but you ain't have to say it like that, damn. You know, it always kind of felt like my expression of my thoughts or my opinions, when I was not being expressly asked for them, just weren't warranted. And I think that was an overriding theme of this episode, is how our pain, our confusion, our questions, our struggles in coming of age get silenced quite a bit because of the expectation to be overly well behaved as a child, but especially as a Black child, especially as a Black child in the South. Children are taught to be seen and not heard, and that goes double time if you're a girl. Like, my brother and I were raised by the same people at the same time. We have two very different upbringings, I can assure you. So anywho, enough about me. Y'all did not come here for me. Dee gets confronted by these white police officers after she has this moment where she's outraged at the joy that these two Black girls are having over like this ice cream. And I can understand that to an extent. I understand, but I wouldn't do it, like Chris Rock said, because when you're grieving, it's upsetting to see other people be happy, because it's like life just goes on while you're hurting. And that's a really hard thing to do. When you're hurting, you want everybody to hurt in a way. I think that's why they say misery loves company, because it's hard to see other people have joy when you feel grief, because I guess on some level you fear that you're never going to feel that again. And maybe it's a jealousy or something, which Ruby kind of touched on, but we'll get there. I was horrified during this scene. I thought that it was going to turn into a sexual assault situation. I was having flashbacks to A Time to Kill. Shouts out to Samuel L. Jackson. Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell. One of the greatest lines ever. This scene was hard. I did not know what these white men were about to do to her, and I was like, if this shit goes south, I'm out. I can't watch that. I don't want to watch a young Black girl being abused in any regard by anybody, but I really didn't want to see this shit. So I'm happy that it didn't go there, but what they did do to her, I have a thing about spit. Blood, pus, and guts do not bother me, but spit, I can't handle spit. Do not like, do not want. So they cast a spell on her. They're like interrogating her, asking her these questions. They cast some sort of spell on her to where she starts to be haunted by these two demons. Scary AF. I don't know what it is about horror movies, thrillers, whatever, that there's this element of children, of child ghosts, and then it's rarely ever just one. It's like some twins or something. I want to tell y'all a story about a weird experience that I had with some twins, but I don't want the person who I used to work for. You know what? I'm gonna find a way to tell y'all that story at a later time. Creepy. So we'll get back to Dee's story, because of course we gotta check in with everybody else, which was really what this episode was. It was like Dee was kind of an afterthought. Anyway, so Ruby and William / Christina sex scene, it's one thing to run a red light, okay, if you know what I mean, but this was next level. This was unsettling, disconcerting. I was like, girl, what? But I did understand her coming home after this funeral and feeling like she should be with her people, like she told Christina, but she didn't want to have sex with this white man as a black woman. And I wonder, for people who are in interracial relationships, do they struggle with that when there's like this widespread grief, anger, confusion, what have you, over things that have happened to the black community? Do they have a hard time going home to their white spouse? Like, what is that like for you? Or even if your spouse is of another minority group, what is it like feeling a grief that they can't possibly comprehend? So that sex scene, it was intentionally unsettling, but I was just like, girl, sir, ma'am, you know, sexuality is a spectrum, as we're seeing in this relationship, because yeah, is she in a relationship with William, or is she in a relationship with Christina, or is she in a relationship with both of them? And if we all have masculine and feminine sides to us, and some of us express one more than the other, you see what I'm saying? Interesting. I'm fascinated by it. Child, Gia popped up and did a woman-to-woman hello Shirley. I said, well, what's about to happen here, girl? I was confused by why Leti was so upset. I was confused by why Tic was so upset, because like, you've been calling her though. You've been hitting her up with questions, so naturally she gonna come answer them for you. Like, why is everyone so angry? What did Gia do? And I was so heartbroken by him telling her what we had wasn't real, because we know as the audience that Gia was very affected by that relationship. And when she had the opportunity to talk to the shaman, she didn't ask the shaman anything about herself, her existence as a, what's it called? What was the thing, the nine-tailed fox that she was? Kumiho. She didn't ask her anything about that. She wants to know about this man who she was in love with, and you gonna tell this girl that what y'all had wasn't real? Vintage fuckboy shit. So hurtful. And I'm just like, you might want to be careful, okay? A woman scorned is one thing, but a Kumiho scorned? Just gonna take your soul. Think it through. Anyway, I don't know what Leti was expecting. What does she want for Tic to tell her? Because if she said, Tic didn't even fully understand what happened, and even if he did fully understand it, how was he going to communicate that to Leti without sounding nuts? You know, people be like, be honest with me, but sometimes you really legit can't handle the truth. Like, how am I supposed to express this to you? So I didn't understand Leti's anger. And then it's like, so where did Gia go? Did she just be like, well, we're done here? She left and went back to Korea? Like, what did she do? So moving along, Christina done had a secret meeting with Tic, where Tic gave her the key to the orrery. Christina had a secret meeting with Leti, where she totally like crashed her being in the church. Like, did Leti invite her? Somebody drop down in the comments to let me know. It's like, girl, don't interrupt my time with the Lord. Excuse me? How dare you? Okay, like Diane Carroll in the 5 Heartbeats when she was talking to Big Red. How dare you come here? Oh, the nerve. She is a white woman though. So I'm still a bit mixed up on this. So this is what I think. I think Christina taught Tic how to cast a protection spell when he traded the Ori key for her, for that information. And I think that Christina, out of her weird feminist thing, like, I'll do this for you, not for him. Girl, miss me. We still don't trust you. I think that she put that seal of whatever on Leti to protect her. But Leti was also asking her to protect Tic. I'm not sure how, that's a little bit mixed up for me. I might need to rewatch that scene again. I don't trust Christina. I'm just gonna say it. The Ruby and Christina / William conversation about Christina not caring, that's so real, because I think that's what a lot of us feel a lot of the time, that it's just like, y'all get to move on and these things affect us so much, and you move on because you have the privilege of not really seeing yourself in this. You know that this wouldn't happen to you. And Christina tells her, like, listen, sweetie, I'm a straight shooter, and I don't think that you even really care about that shit like you said you do, because look at where you at. And I was like, oh, shots fired, points made. So Ruby, got to do some soul searching for herself. You trade places with a white woman and you have sex with a white woman / man, but you want them to be out, like, figure it out, work it through. I thought that was a very honest conversation on both ends. I think they both gave each other something to think about, which we see later in a really weird way. Hello. So Tic and Montrose finally have a moment of intimacy where Tic is, has left Leti's house. He's about to cast a spell because he wants to protect his family, because he knows that Leti is pregnant, even though Leti hasn't told him. He knows Leti is pregnant because he went to the future in the multi-universe machine, and the book that he came back with, written by George Freeman, was actually his son. I was like, child, Uncle George in the future, but it was actually his son, who apparently they named after Uncle George. And he's sharing this with Montrose, and Montrose is sharing with him that there was a preacher back in my day. He got caught in the park with a man. They came and locked him up. They took him to some sort of insane asylum. And there really is a thing about trying to lobotomize the gay out of people. Back in the day, the show Ratchet explores that a bit. Like, mental health facilities back in the day, whew, shit, okay? Because they was just figuring stuff out. I mean, that can be true for a lot of medical history, honestly. You got to break a few eggs, I guess. Like, what the shit? But they really did try to lobotomize the gay out of people. And Montrose is like, I would rather live in the closet in the shadows than have my brain cut out, and he's like, I didn't cheat on your mom. Your mama cheated on him, though. Hello. But we're not gonna talk about that. So I was really happy to see them be vulnerable with each other, partner together to cast this spell, because Montrose is like, I want to protect my grandchild too. That's my intention. So they cast this spell together. He reveals that he's dyslexic. And I'm like, yes, open up. Let the floodgates, break, whatever the phrase is. And they don't know whether or not the spell took, because nothing immediately happened, right? So again, we don't know which spell. Anyway, what the shit was with Christina wanting to experience Emmett Till's death? Who was that for? Did Ruby really get to her to the point, or was she just testing out her own immortality? Because if she was, that was kind of an empty gesture. Like, you went through this shit knowing that you were gonna survive it. Like, why are we here? White people, well-intentioned white people, I don't know whether she's well-intentioned or not, but they continue to do very performative things to prove their allyship, and that's what this was for me. Did not like, Chad. Did not like. Ruby and Leti have a conversation in the basement. Ruby reveals, girl, I know everything. Leti reveals that she's pregnant. And bitch, we can't trust Christina. What you mean? I'm still not convinced that Ruby hasn't been turned. That she isn't secretly spying for Christina. I don't trust Ruby. I don't. I still don't. The police show up to, I don't know what, they said there was some sort of meeting happening there. Bullshit. Long story short, these cops end up shooting up the house, and at some point, Leti, I don't know, like a boss just decides that she gonna sit up, and like these bullets were bouncing off of her, which was a very, very cool scene. Quite enjoyed it. Police. Tic is on his way back to Leti's house, hears these shots, and, takes off running towards the house. They see him. They turn the guns on him. Leti is like, oh, shit, I got to save my boo. And then out comes I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Shoggoth. That's what those animals are called, a Shoggoth. Y'all let me know how to pronounce it. I'll look it up. Anyway, and I was like, oh, shit, yes. Like, right in the nick of time. I love when things like that happen. It was slow and it was dramatic. I thought it was very cool. And on the podcast, they were saying that they, didn't want to lean into how happy they were to see these people being brutally killed by this monster. I was like, fuck that, add to cart. Like, How is this any more brutal than them just shooting up innocent people's homes for existing? Fuck that. Take their heads off. I don't give a shit. It's a movie. Well, it's a show. So I don't feel bad. Anyway. And then they discovered that one or both of these protection spells worked. For all we know, did Gia do something to protect? I don't know anything. One or both of these spells worked. They were able to command this thing or calm it. It kind of gave me Jon Snow when he met Drogon for the first time, and he was like, I guess you all right. So let's go back to Dee. All the while this is happening, the only person who's actually interested in looking out for Dee is Montrose, which is like, oh, so now you a parent? You know, he's trying to explain to Dee, like, this shit happens sometimes. I know why you're angry, blah, 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 blah. Dee gets suddenly, it seemed so sudden that she had this, like, anger, this disrespect, this, like, voice. This wasn't built up enough for me. Where did this come from? I understand the source of it, but she was just riding around on this bike randomly screaming at people and things, and you know, she's being haunted by Topsy and Bopsy, which Topsy is a character from Uncle Tom's Cabin. I have not read that book, but Topsy was a slave that was very much othered. Her parents, she didn't know her parents. Her mom was basically just like used for breeding, basically, as a slave, like they did. And you know, she was dirty. She had been abused. You know, they do the whole thing about like the pickaninny with like the hair and the big red lips and all that stuff like that. And she was very, I don't know, some people feel like she was used for comic relief in the book, but then other people were saying that the writer of Uncle Tom's Cabin, who's Harriet Beecher Stowe, if I'm not mistaken, used a child girl as a slave to show people more so to humanize slaves, I guess, in a way. But either way, she's like the original pickaninny archetype, I suppose. And that's what I think they were supposed to represent, like childhood trauma that haunts you in some regard. I'm still not sure. Again, there are things about this storyline that I just was not sure about. Maybe because I'm not connected enough to horror. Maybe I don't know the story of Topsy enough, but I was just like, okay, well, why this choice? I didn't understand her confronting these police officers the way that she did. Where did she get the courage? And they were saying on the podcast that she realized that, like, you know, she could confront these demons, then she could confront these white men. And I'm like, I don't know. It's not quite curling over for me. Why didn't they kill her? Like, these white police officers weren't gonna let no young black girl who's there alone talk to them any kind of way. And she was just in there like, it fucking stinks in here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I guess. And she's riding the bike towards the demon. And the speech by, what's the young girl's name? Naomi Wobbler is playing. And I wanted it to be a powerful moment, but I just didn't completely get it. She goes back to the garage. She starts drawing, which I know drawing can be therapeutic. Drawing is her thing, sure. And she decides that she wants to stand and fight. And it looks like they were going to get her until Montrose showed up, because you see one of Topsy or Bopsy kind of pouting when Montrose comes and he's holding her, and she's bloodied. But it's like, what? I really, you know, a lot of the story I can stick with. A lot of it I can make sense of, even from a non-literal stance. But I did not fully get Dee's whole, yeah, I didn't get it. I don't understand the baseball cap. Did it belong to Bobo? If you guys understood or made sense of Dee's whole thing this episode, let me know in the comments. I wanted to connect with it, but it just didn't quite curl over for me. I felt like some things were missing. So yeah, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, join my Patreon, and send me money if you like what you see and want to help me continue to create. Yeah, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Again, this was my least favorite. I'm hoping that the next episode will build upon it. We only have 2 more episodes to go. So yeah, we'll see. All right, thanks guys. Bye.